Welcome to Chasing Hardware, the podcast that sits down with the sports figures you grew up with and hears their stories. Welcome to Chasing Hardware. I am your host, Rich Lamello. My guest today is a born and raised Texan. He was an All-American at TCU and was the first official draft pick of the Dallas Cowboys. He went to 11 Pro Bowls. He's on both the All-Decade team for the 60s and the 70s. He won a Super Bowl, and he's in both the College and Pro Football's Hall of Fame. And he's Mr. Cowboy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Lilly. Bob, welcome to Chasing Hardware.
Thank you, Rich. Nice to be here with you. Good.
Well, I look forward to chatting, Bob. As you know, kind of the format of the show is we just kind of walk through, the whole life. You're born in Olney, Texas, and raised in Throckmorton. I believe your family was in kind of farming and ranching. And you attended Throckmorton High School, and then your last year you went to Oregon for high school, for your senior year of high school. Kind of tell me about growing up in Texas and the move to Oregon.
Yeah, well, my grandparents and all were from Throckmorton, Texas, but we were a small town, 1,300. We didn't have a hospital, so most of the women that had children went to Olney, and Olney is about 3,000 back then. Had a nice hospital, and that's where I was born. But then after about 4 or 5 days, I was back in Throckmorton, and of course I had to go to Olney again later, about 6 or 7 years old, get my tonsils out. I'll never forget that. My dad said, "Well, we're going to get some ice cream afterwards." I was so sick I didn't want any ice cream. But anyway, yeah, we grew up in Throckmorton. We were. Dad was he was actually a custom farmer. He did hay baling, wheat, cut wheat. He had a bulldozer, a couple of bulldozers. We built ponds for the cow, to catch water for the cattle. We also deep plowed fields, and we also dozed mesquite trees. They were kind of a nuisance tree on the land out there. We're pretty dry anyway, and those mesquite trees take a lot of water, so we cleaned off a lot of that. And he grew up actually as a mechanic. His dad had part interest in a Ford dealership there, and so he took up mechanicking while he was in school, about 11 years old, and he could run a lathe and a welder and everything by the time he was 15 years old. So anyway, quite talented person, really.
Yeah, and you go to Throckmorton High, and Throckmorton, I looked it up. It was about 1,300 people back in the 50s. So this is a small town, and it's more like 800 now.
That's right.
And you're kind of in north central Texas. You're about 2+ hours away from Fort Worth, and you're a football player and a basketball player. You're all district in both through your junior year. Tell me about playing high school football and basketball in Texas, and then, kind of what made the move to Oregon, kind of take place, and about your year in Pendleton, Oregon.
Well, in Throckmorton, I grew pretty fast as far as my height. And I think hauling hay, I was the hay hauler. I started driving a tractor when I was 8, but when I got to be 11, I not only got to mow the hay, rake the hay, and bale the hay, but I got to haul the hay.
Right.
So I had a flatbed trailer, and I hooked it onto the back of the tractor. And I had 2 straps. I would tie the steering wheel down, put it in low granny gear, we called it, and let it idle along while I threw hay bales up on the flat trailer.
Sure.
And then I would turn the key off and straighten them all up, and then I would start it up again and let it start going, and I'd throw more hay on there until I got all I could stack and take it over the barn, throw it up into the top of the barn. And I started doing that when I was 12. Wow. And I did that till my end of my junior year. But anyway, we were in a severe drought, and we ended up having to drive our hay baler and all, pull them with tractors to a town called Mundy, Texas. It's about, through the ranch, it was about 32 miles. And we would go over there, and they had irrigation. So we baled hay. That's where Dad did most of the combining. He did the deep plowing with the Caterpillars, Plus, we were able to bale hay and Dad also combined wheat over there in that area. And so I did the same thing over there. We got a windrower. And the windrower was 17 feet swath. So I could cut twice as much. I could cut 50 acres a day with that.
Wow.
Not only did you cut it, but it had a belt about this wide, about probably a foot and a half, 2 feet wide. And it rolled, you cut the hay and it fell back on the belt. The belt was moving and it dropped it out into a row as you went along. You didn't have to use a rake to rake it up. So then in 2 or 3 days, my dad would come along and bale that hay. That was alfalfa hay. And then I would get to haul it. Those bales were about 120 pounds apiece. So I got a good workout at doing that. And
that's
then
where
I learned to run.
Country Strong comes from, right?
Yeah.
That's where the Country Strong.
Yeah. Well, I must build you up inside here because that's all you're doing is throwing that up. It's about 10 foot up there.
Yeah.
Then go up and stack it up, all that. But the windrower, they had a jack on it, so jacked it up and would back the tractor up and had a trailer hitch. And then you put a bolt through there and tighten it down and pull that along. The jack broke off, so I thought, well, this is about when I'm 14. I thought, I believe I can lift it up, but I got to have something to put under it. So I got some rocks, and I picked it up, screwed rocks under there with my foot, and had to finally got the right rocks, and I kept them. Until I used them from then on.
Yeah.
So anyway, one day one of my buddies and I fished when all that spring basketball and track were over. We would go fishing every morning at 5:30, and he had a Renault. That's the first foreign car I'd ever seen. Had the motor in the back.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had a flat, and we had a wrench but no jack. And I said, his name was Billy Don Davis. And I said, Billy Don, I don't think this car looks any heavier than that windrower did. And I said, if you get some rocks, we can gather some rocks up. I think I can pick it up. And you can put the rocks under it and we'll change the tire. So sure enough, I was able to do it. And so anyway, the next morning I'll go to school and I'm looking at all these guys that are older than me and bigger. And they're out there trying to pick that car up. I think one of them got it up about 3 or 4 inches. And I'm thinking, and I'm afraid, and I've been afraid of them all my time here. But anyway, that was the first time I thought, well, maybe I am strong. I don't know. Everybody didn't tell me I was, but I didn't think about it. So anyway, I had a good year my junior year in football and basketball. And the drought stopped our business. I mean, it was the farmers couldn't afford to have the trees dozed. They had no more plowing, no more ponds to build because they couldn't afford it. There were no hay in Throckmorton County to bale because we didn't have irrigation. So we started calling. My mother started calling all our kinfolks, and her first cousin lived in near Pendleton, Oregon. Found out a job. So I guess we had no other thing to do. We had to do something.
Yeah.
So we sold our house, we sold our pickup, we sold all of our equipment, and we had a 53. Our second car was a 53 Chevrolet, not 53 Studebaker, 4-door, had a V8 engine. Thank goodness. Daddy built a small trailer. We hauled what we could. We went to Pendleton. We went to Oregon. We rented a house. It was up on the hill, but it was a duplex. And years later, when I'm up there on one of my reunions, my sister, she goes with me, and our family, she goes up with the family. She measured the house, and it was only 1,300 foot home. So we had 650 square feet that we lived in, 5 of us.
Wow.
But I never knew the difference. It was fine with me, and the people up there were just like they were in Throckmorton. They had better diction, but other than that, they were farmers, ranchers, and They did all the same things that I was used to doing. In fact, the first morning after we played our first game was the first day I hauled hay. Saturday was on Saturday, so every Saturday I hauled hay until it got cold.
Yeah.
And that was for Mr. Horn, and his son was one of my teammates, Lad Horn. And anyway, football up there was wonderful. It was 4A. It was the top class, and we went to the semifinals, and we lost to Marshfield, who had won the past 3 years. I think they won 2 or 3 years. They had won state in a row, and they won it again that year. But we got to the semifinals, and we didn't quite make that. We got to the semifinals in basketball, and that's the team that beat us there won the championship. But I did make All-State in both football and basketball that year, and played in the Oregon All-Star game,
Right.
which was in the summer. And then I came back after that to TCU. But I had gone to visit Oregon and Oregon State and Washington and a couple more smaller colleges up in that area that offered me scholarships. And I just felt like I'd heard Mom and Dad talk about when they moved back to Throckmorton, and I didn't want to be up there by myself.
Mm.
And TCU sent me a 1-cent postcard. And it was from Coach Allie White, who was our line coach. Said, "Dear Robert, we're prepared to offer you a 4-year scholarship with all your expenses, your room and board, and $10 a month laundry check. If you would like to go to TCU." And so I called down there from my coach's phone. We didn't have a phone at our house.
Mm-hmm.
And talked to Coach A. Martin, and he said, "Why don't you come down and visit if you can?" And I said, "Well, I'll have to drive. We only got one car." He said, "Well," he said, "if you do," and I told him I had a friend that was also a great basketball player that wanted to try out. Said, "Y'all come down, we'll give you $150 a piece for your expenses." So Dad said, "Take the car. I can borrow a car for a week or two or whatever it was." So I drove down to TCU, and Larry Applegate was the guy that went with me. Larry tried out for basketball. They offered him a scholarship, but the way they had it structured then at TCU, if he would have to pay his first year to get a full scholarship the next 3 years, and I don't think he could afford it right then. And so, anyway, I signed my acceptance to the scholarship they offered me at TCU, and then we were about to leave, and I remembered that we hadn't got any money yet. We only had about $10 left. So I told Coach Smart, and I said, "Coach, I don't think we got enough money to get back home." And he said, "Oh, Laddie, I'm sorry. Just got to see your check." Took us over to the bank and cashed it, gave it to us. I went back and paid my grandmother $20 that I'd borrowed from her. We spent the night, and she fixed us up with about enough food to last a day and a half. And we made it back to Oregon. And then my aunt and uncle came up to visit Mom and Dad. And my dad had a sister that lived in Puyallup. She and her family lived in Puyallup, Washington.
Sure.
And so they had been visiting them as well. They came back through and picked me up and took me back to Fort Worth, where they lived. Hmm. And that's where our TCU is located.
Yeah.
Dropped me off at the dorm, and I felt like I was totally alone. I had no phone, we didn't have cell phones or anything back then.
Sure.
But we did have the phone in the hallway. I mean, each end of the dorm had a phone. So I could call collect to my grandmother, because Mom and Dad hadn't come back yet. But it started raining. It was a Lilly luck, we called it. As soon as we got out of Texas, it started raining.
Right.
So anyway, Dad and them came back, and he got a mail route, and he got to watch all my college games. And
that's
I
great.
was pretty blessed because my senior year was 1960. That was my senior football year. And 1960, the Dallas Texans and the Dallas Cowboys became teams in Dallas.
Yeah, at the same time.
At the same time, and that was my senior year basically my senior year in college. 60 was the beginning that fall, and then 61, of course, was after January. But anyway, I'd made All-American that year and gone to New York about 5 times and seen the big town. And I'm thinking, here I am, a country boy. There was a rancher in Throckmorton, and his name was Brown, and he had a clothing store there. He didn't have one. He bought his clothes at a clothing store in downtown Fort Worth. And so he let me know that he had paid them some money for me to have some clothes to wear.
Mhm.
And so I went down, and sure enough, he had put $500 in there in my account.
Oh, wow.
They outfitted me really well. It lasted me about 3 or 4 years, and I've been so thankful about that all my life. And his son is very prosperous and done very well in Throckmorton, and I'm always, every time I see him, I remind him of that. How
Yeah.
gracious his dad was.
That's great.
But
Hey,
anyway, that was how I got started, and of course I went to Coach Abe Martin. I was drafted number 2 by the Texans and number 1 by the Cowboys.
Yep.
And so I went to Coach Abe Martin and I said, I don't know what to do. I mean, I don't, he said, well, both families are really nice families. They're good family, got good reputation. He said, if the money's the same, though, about the same, he said, you might want to think about going with the NFL. He said, because I've been here, I don't know, he grew up in Jacksboro, which wasn't far from, and went to TCU and coached there for many years. Coach Martin, he thought he'd seen 2 leagues come to Dallas and fail. And he said, I don't know if the AFL will have it what it takes to last, because we haven't had anybody to stay yet. But he said, I think the NFL will be here. And sure enough, after my 3rd year, they moved to Kansas City. The Texans did, and became the Chiefs.
yeah.
And I almost went with them anyway, because all my buddies from the Southwest Conference, pretty much all my good friends, went to the Texans. And so I went with a team that had, the Cowboys didn't have a draft the first year. So they had players that they picked. The teams put pools, like 5 or 6 players up, and the Cowboys would get to pick 1 or 2 of them. And that's the way they basically formed their team.
Yeah.
Other than that, it was all free agents.
Yeah. And
So
I saw that they had they kind of arranged to get Don Meredith, who was another Texas boy who went to SMU. You played against, obviously, for a couple of years. And they kind of arranged to get him for that first year along with Eddie LeBaron. Did you kind of, obviously playing against him for a couple of years and then playing with him for a decade? What was your relationship with Don Meredith like?
Oh, it was excellent, yeah. But I didn't really know Don in college. We played him. I knew about his ability. It was great. He had great ability. But Dutch Meyer was our athletic director, and he had been a coach. He coached TCU back in '39, I think it was, to the college championship. And he's the one that they say invented I don't know whether double wing or all of them played single wing back then, but his wing tee or something, whatever it was, it's sort of like spread formation.
Okay.
But that's what Don Meredith was running at SMU, was similar, whatever it was. So he came out and coached us on defense. And we sacked Don about 10 or 11 times during that game. And Meredith always said the worst he ever got hurt was when we played TCU his senior year.
Oh, really? That's
that was
interesting.
my junior year.
Huh.
And anyway, I think that was because the coach knew where the weakness was, and he taught us. We did.
Sure.
But anyway, then of course I went with the Cowboys. And first year we went to Northville, Minnesota for training camp.
Hmm.
That was the last bank robbery that the James boys did.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm from Minnesota. I know Northville.
Really? Yeah. You know
it's
about
Carlton and St. Olaf are.
St. Olaf, yeah.
Yeah.
I was up in the very top turret with a guy named Glenn Gregory from Abilene. He was a great receiver for Abilene High
Okay.
in SMU.
Okay. You know, I read something. I'm curious if you've heard this story. The AFL gives Lamar Hunt a team in Dallas, right? The Dallas Texans.
Right.
And the NFL had not been planning on giving Dallas a team, but did not want the AFL to get a foothold there.
Right.
So they give Clint Murchison a team, or they're about to. And I think it was George Preston Marshall is the owner of the Redskins. And if you think about the way the NFL was laid out then, Washington was basically the southernmost city, and they controlled the whole. So they had a monopoly on the South for decades. And he didn't want to give up Dallas, believe it or not, from Washington. He didn't want to give up Dallas. So Clint Murchison buys the rights to the song "Hail to the Redskins" and basically says to George Preston Marshall, if you ever want to play the song again at your stadium, you have to let me get this team. Marshall says, okay. Murchison gives him the song, gets the Cowboys, and off they go. Had you ever heard that?
Well, I'd heard something like that about that song, but I didn't know if it was, I never knew if that was true or not.
Yeah, and I don't know either, but it's a good story.
It was a good story. Yeah, I think it is. Great story. I know that George Hallis helped Coach Landry quite a bit with future trades for Meredith, and he kind of assisted the Cowboys in getting started.
Yeah, because nobody wins if a team is just dreadful, especially competing against an AFL team.
Right.
You know, you want everybody. What's it? Rising tide lifts all boats. You want those boats lifted somewhat, right?
Yeah.
So you're a Texas guy. You're at TCU. You're drafted by the two Dallas teams. You choose the Cowboys. Obviously, their first year they actually do go winless. They go 0-11-1.
Yeah, I wasn't on that team though.
You weren't on that team. You come in 61.
I think did we win one or just tie one?
In 60, yeah, I think it was 0-11-1. 61. I think. Oh, 61, you were 4-9-1.
Well, that was my first year.
So, yeah. I think you were 4-9-1.
I thought we'd won some games. I knew they had won any the year before.
Yeah. I think you guys won 4 games and tied 1 in your first year. And you know, Don Meredith is there. Don Perkins is there.
Right.
You begin a streak, your 14-year career, starting in game 1, where you don't miss a single start your entire career in the regular season. Right. Which is just 14 years, 14 games a year, every single start, 196 games, just incredible.
Missed one playoff game.
One playoff game, yeah, in the 70s, right?
Hamstring, yeah, I tore my hamstring in 2 this week before.
Yeah, that's just an amazing run. And then
what?
My hamstring picture.
Yeah, I do.
You want to see a hamstring picture?
Let's see it. Yeah.
Find it first.
Please go find it.
Okay. And while we're waiting for that, I'm just fascinated. I'm always fascinated about the way like teams are constructed. And obviously this is well before free agency, decades before free agency. It's interesting looking at your drafts and your free agents every year. You know, it's like 1 or 2 guys every year being added, and it's just building towards, you know, the great run that the Cowboys had. And also like just the visionary of the vision of like Tex Schramm and Tom Landry, like one of the first guys who comes on board, Cornell Green, a basketball player from Utah State, and, you know, becomes stud defensive back for you guys for over a decade. And then, you know, the next year you bring in Leroy Jordan, from Alabama. And I am curious, in 63, that's the year that the Texans leave to become the Chiefs. It's also the year that JFK is shot in Dallas.
Right.
And for those of us who weren't around at that point, it's kind of hard to imagine it this way, but Dallas took some heat for that happening in Dallas. And that first game, you guys go to play Cleveland, and the fans aren't that receptive to the Dallas Cowboys. Does that stand out in your memory? Do you recall that?
Yeah, nobody was very receptive to Dallas that year.
Yeah.
And I remember the first, we were trying to decide whether, the league was trying to decide whether to call that game off or what, play it later.
Sure.
But they didn't call it off. And I remember we were out in practice when we heard the news. we always went up early because we were in prop planes back then, prop jets,
Sure.
not pure jet. And the trainers would come out, and finally Coach Landry called us all together and said, the president has been shot, but he's in the hospital, so we don't know how he's doing. Well, by the time practice was over, he was gone, President Kennedy. And it kind of left, it deflated the players. I mean, we were totally deflated. We had really all wanted to go down and watch the parade, but we knew we had to go to Cleveland, and now we had to pack our stuff and go to the airport and go to Cleveland. And so it was very depressing. And when we got to Cleveland, I remember nobody would help us get our equipment off. We had to help with the equipment loaded into the bus or truck or whatever it was, and go to the hotel. And so we would just go to these little restaurants that were like a hamburger joint or something, where they wouldn't have a clue who we were. Not together, just a couple of us at a time.
Sure.
And eat at that night. And when we went out on the field the next day, people were booing us and throwing things. Although I don't think anybody got hit with a bottle or anything, but we wore our full uniform, our headgear. We had a parka that we put on. It was knee length. We wore that and sit on the bench. We did not get up and stand up till they called our name, and we shucked our deal and ran out on the field.
Sure.
And I don't remember much about the game. I know we lost it. I don't think they felt very good about playing it either, the Browns. So it was a game that was the most peculiar game I've ever played in, where there wasn't any emotion. I mean, usually you can get up for a play, we get rah, 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 rah. There was none of that. It was, I think we all were thinking about what happened. And I think the Browns were thinking the same thing. And the unfortunate thing for us was it happened in our backyard. And that went on for 2 or 3 years. I mean, we finally got back where the crowd liked us again or tolerated us.
Wow, I didn't realize it went on that long. I thought it was maybe a couple of week thing. Yeah, I remember Pete Rozelle saying it was the regret of his career, his whatever it was, 30 years running the NFL, to play those games that Sunday after Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah, it was pretty tough on the players, pretty tough, I'm sure, on the fans, as well. But
yeah,
I'll never forget that day. And when we got back home, I felt kind of relieved. And we played, I don't remember where we played after that, but generally we played in the east part of the country, which I know the Philadelphia fans didn't like us much because they were throwing bottles at us.
Right. Yeah. that might still happen today.
Yeah, not today. Yeah.
But meanwhile, the team is getting gradually better. You win 4 games, you win 5 games, you win 6. Gradually the team is getting better. You're adding more guys. Mel Renfro comes on the team.
I think
what's that?
Mel came in 64 or 60?
I think 64. Yeah, I think he and Bob Hayes both came in 64. Obviously, Bob Hayes, a sprinter from Florida A&M. Again, Landry and Schramm showing like that, kind of inspired thinking, like taking people and just putting them into spots. And actually that year, another guy, Pete Gent, wide receiver, who had been a basketball player at Michigan State, comes to the team. We'll get to him a little bit later, but he joined the team that year also.
Well, some of the players that really helped us a lot coming in. One was Tony Liscio, and I think he came from Green Bay, and then he went to Tulsa, but he was from Pittsburgh, I think, originally, not Pittsburgh Steelers, but from where he went to high school.
Sure.
Because we used to go up and have dinner with his parents Friday night before the game on Sunday.
Got it.
And anyway, Licio, he was a very good offensive tackle for us throughout his career. We had Pettis Norman, who came from a small school. Pettis was a very, very good blocking tight end.
Yep.
Pretty good receiver. Cornell Green, you mentioned earlier. Cornell was an All-American basketball player 2 years at Utah State. And he just stopped by. The Cowboys invited him. Gil Brandt is the guy that found all these people.
Okay.
And Cornell came out. He didn't even know how to put his thigh pads on. And I had to teach him. But he became a great player. He played cornerback, and then he played strong safety. And the best play I think I ever saw him make was in the Super Bowl VI, when Warfield got by Mel a little bit, just a little, but just enough.
Right.
Cornell was the second guy to cover him. Cornell slipped, but he got back up and he ran and ran. And he jumped up in the air high enough that he could tip the ball. And this was like, he must have jumped 5, 6 feet off the ground.
Wow.
And it went right over Warfield's hands. So made a great play. That would have not changed the game. But anyway, we got guys like that. I mean, we got Gector from Oregon, who was a track man with Mel. I think he came a year earlier. He was strong. He was a weak safety for us. Mel played safety, and then he went to cornerback, which he became a Hall of Famer cornerback.
Sure.
And then, of course, we had Leroy Jordan. Leroy became a great linebacker for us. And we had George Andre was a guy that he came my second year also. Marquette, Michigan, Marquette University. Their team didn't play his senior year. So Gil Brandt found him, and we got him in the 9th round. He probably would have gone in the 2nd round anyway.
That's amazing.
And
He just like
George
lifted
was
weights and prepared all year.
Oh, he was great. I'm telling you. He was 6'6". Of course, they got Jethro Pugh about my 4th year, I think, maybe my 5th. And then Larry Cole came along about my 6th year. We had some pretty good ends, Maury Yeomans and Larry Stevens, but these guys all got hurt. So we slowly built a good defense. We had really good defense for quite a few years. Our offense was good. We had LeBaron there at first, as you mentioned earlier, and he started my rookie year. And then they alternated Don and LeBaron my 2nd year, which we didn't like that much. But then the next year, Don got to start. And then the next year, I think they drafted Craig Martin.
Right. And
then the next year, I think Don and Craig alternated for a while. And I don't know why we did that, but we did.
Yeah.
And anyway, we had, as you say, we had Pete Chent. We got Lance Rensel somewhere in there, and we had a pretty good. We had Dwayne Thomas played real well for us for a couple of years, 3 years, and anyway, we had to always bring in new talent. Gil Brandt would find them.
Yeah.
That's one you never heard of. They were good people.
Yeah. And then you go from kind of winning 3, 4, 5 games a year. All of a sudden you're 7-7 in 65. That doomsday defense has started to come together. At that point, you've got you and Andre and Pugh up front. And then in 66, you go 10-3-1. It's the first of 6 straight division titles. You lose to Green Bay in the Cotton Bowl in effectively the NFL championship.
Third quarter, Meredith was on the 1 foot line going in, and Robbins either, I don't remember if he hit his arm or if he caught the ball, but it got knocked out of Don's arm or hit his arm as he was passing, and they intercepted and that ended that game. That would have been the first Super Bowl.
Yep, exactly.
Super Bowl one. The next year was the Ice Bowl.
Right.
Ice Bowl, and we were at the same thing. We were ahead, but we got out. We were in the quadrant where all the ice was.
Right.
Where the water had come up, and I kept trying to dig holes in it, but my little cleats wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So Leroy, I said, we need to call timeout and get a screwdriver out here and just dig 2 holes, one for Jethro and one for me, because they're going to come right up the middle. They had tried running around the edge and slipped down.
Yeah.
But anyway, we lost that one. And then we had to wait a while and went to Super Bowl V and played Baltimore. I thought we were going to win that one, and it didn't turn out that way.
Yeah.
But we geared ourselves to win the next one. Which was
Yeah. Oh, it was the perfect build. I mean, I'm sure it didn't feel that way at the time, but it was the perfect build. But let me go back and ask a question about the Ice Bowl. First of all, there's obviously been tons of shows and documentaries and footage and NFL film stuff, so it's been talked about a lot. But what was it like just in that locker room before that game? You've been on the field warming up. You know you've got about 3 hours out there coming up. What are you guys thinking in the locker room? Are you just thinking, I cannot believe we're about to do this?
Well, we hadn't been out yet. But when we were getting up that morning, George, my roommate, George Andrew, he went out to Mass and came back. Didn't say anything. He grew up in Minnesota or Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, he grew up in Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan.
Came in, got a glass of water, called it in. They had single pane windows back then. He went over to the window. He said, "Look at this." Threw the glass up, and most of it froze before it got to the bottom. He said, "It's already 19 below zero." Well, maybe it was 13 below zero then, and a 35-mile-an-hour wind. By the time we got on the field, it was 19 below and 35-mile-an-hour wind, which was right at 50 degrees below zero chill factor. And Ernie said we can't wear gloves. We didn't have anything to put on our heads. Green Bay comes out, they've got on gloves, they've got turtlenecks on, they've got a thing goes around their head, their face is open, and we're literally freezing.
Yeah.
I don't even know how we made it. They should have had coffee or something. They should have been feeding us hot coffee.
Right. Yeah. There's footage of, there's a play where you're running and it's like you're running on glass. I mean, it's just, yeah. And yeah, then the famous shot before, Stars dive where, you can see you kind of kicking, like, kind of trying to tread the dirt a little bit. And so, yeah, so, and at that point, I mean, nobody likes to hear it, but, it's, it's becoming a team that like is, getting to the playoffs every year and just not getting it done. The next couple of years, you lose to Cleveland.
Yeah.
And it's when the NFL still has this funny rule where it wasn't until the mid 70s, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, it's not until the mid 70s that there's such thing as home field advantage to the highest rank, they rank the teams. Right. So you guys in 68, the next year, are 12-2. You're a couple of games ahead of Cleveland. You have to go to Cleveland for the right to go to for the right to advance in the playoffs, and you lose in Cleveland, at their home field. And then you lose to them again the next year. What were those years like? Like, you had 2 heartbreakers to the Packers. Now you're losing to Cleveland. What was, kind of the mentality on the team at that point?
Well, I think that the headlines in the paper put it pretty succinctly. Cowboys can't win the big one.
Right. Yeah.
And that's sort of the way we felt about ourselves. We can't win the big one. And,
sure.
And especially the next year after we lost Super Bowl V, we got really mad at ourselves. And we got in the huddle after Super Bowl V, and we decided that we were going to start working out as soon as we got back home and got rested up. And we were going to work out every day, and we were going to be ready. And the next year we were going back, and we were going to win.
Yeah.
And we did that.
Yep.
So maybe we should have been doing that all
the time. You live and you learn, right?
After we did it, we figured it out. Now, we didn't go back the next year, but the next year I think they went back in 75.
Yeah, the year after. Yeah,
they lost to the Steelers, but I mean, it was kind of a fluke loss, really.
Right. Well, and in the Super Bowl V, the one you mentioned against the Colts, I remember seeing Mike Curtis interviewed afterwards, and the Mad Dog, he's he was angry because the Super Bowl they should have won was the one against the Jets. He was angry that that they had lost that game and that they won the game with you guys. Obviously, there's the iconic image of you throwing the helmet, which just kind of just shows the sheer frustration of the moment.
Yeah.
And then you talk about sweet vindication. Probably, I mean, you could argue one of the 2 or 3 most iconic plays in Super Bowl history is you sacking Bob Greasy for 29 yards in Super Bowl VI. I watched that play a couple of times. I mean, that play is fascinating to watch. It looks like you guys have a stunt on, and you and Larry Cole are both. What's that?
We both sides had a stunt.
Oh, both sides. Okay.
Larry went first on his side, and Jethro came around.
Okay.
I went first on my side, and George came around me, and we practiced that all the time in practice.
Okay.
And so I got George knocked the center off that was going to pick me up and push me on out, and so I was Larry. He got totally free because they both went with Jethro.
Yep.
And so we had him kind of in a pincher.
Yeah.
And so anyway, one time Bob was on the airplane. He said, "How did you catch me?" And I said, "Because I'm faster than you are, Bob." I don't know. Not. I don't know if I am or not. I told him that, and then I told him, I said, you guys went on to win 17-0 the next year. And I said, nobody's ever done that. May never do it again. I said, you ought to forget about me and think about that. That's what I would be thinking about.
Right. Exactly.
And we've never had another crossword.
That's funny. Yeah. It's an amazing play. I mean, I counted, he turned 4 times, and it's you and Cole just there every time he turns, and then finally.
Can you see that?
Oh, I can. Yeah.
That's my
okay.
thigh. That's my hamstring.
Oh my gosh, that's the one in 1973 or 72, whatever year it was. Wow. For the viewer, I'm looking at a picture of his torn hamstring, Bob Lilly's torn hamstring from the playoffs in 73. It's amazing. It is a torn hamstring.
Yeah, they drained blood off my heel.
Oh my gosh.
And this is, you can see the little tendon that tore up there. I mean, it wasn't fun, and it took a long time to rehab because I tore it, and I had to build up the supporting the other tendons in my hip. But it's amazing what you can do, because I started out, as soon as I quit hurting, started going over and doing leg curls and leg extensions on the machine we had. So I usually did them with both legs. With this leg, I wanted to do it for a month or 2 without my other leg involved.
Right.
So I started out with 20 pounds. That's all I could do. It's as much weight as I could go back with. By the time the 2 months was over with, I was going back with about 110 pounds. You can feel the hole.
Still to this day.
Yeah. All those other tendons grew back. I mean, they healed and they got strong.
Right.
But this one, you could put about that much of your fist in it.
Wow. That's amazing. I had no idea. Wow. That's crazy. That's amazing. And I'm curious. So Ernie Stautner was your defensive line coach for a while, and then towards the end, your defensive coordinator. What was he like? I mean, he's a legendary player himself. And what was it like playing for him? And then, of course, the obvious question also, what was it like playing for Tom Landry?
Well, playing for Ernie was great. I mean, playing for Tom was great too. But Ernie was, I think all of our coaches had been in the service before they became coaches or something, or during that time. I know Coach Landry was a pilot. Ernie was a Marine. He hit all islands and up near Japan. And Ermal Allen was one of the coaches. He was Army, I think. Jim Myers, I think he was Army. No, he was a Marine too, I think. Anyway, first of all, very disciplined, very, very disciplined the way everything was run. You earned your seat when they called the roll. It was $50. Every time you relayed, it was doubled. It doubled. If you were late once, that was 50. If you were late twice, that was 100. If you were late 3 times, that was 200. Our weight, if we were a pound overweight, $15, it doubled. But if you were overweight the next time, 10 pounds, say you were at $15, it doubled. So that was $300 or 30 times 10 pounds, 300 bucks.
300. Yeah. Wow.
And everything was that way. If you missed an airplane, like we were going out of town or coming back, if you were late, it was $500. If you lost your notebook, it was $1,000.
Wow.
If you missed a plane, it was $1,500. And I mean, everything, but we knew it. And we didn't break the rules very often either.
Right. Yeah.
They checked our rooms every night in training camp. They had somebody come down and check. And you'd hear them, they'd come in and look around and smell of you and see what you'd been doing.
That's amazing.
And anyway, so we just learned, that's the way we lived. Training camp was always 6 weeks in Thousand Oaks, sometimes 7. And
it's amazing.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
And then we came back here and it was hot. We wanted to go back to Thousand Oaks after we got back.
Yeah, can we go back to California?
No.
That's funny. By the way, I should say that sack of Greasy in the Super Bowl, I was looking it up because I was thinking to myself, this could be the longest sack of all time. And it is now no longer the longest sack of all time, but for years it was. There have been a couple of, what's that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill got sacked for 38 yards a few years ago. So that's now the longest one. Yeah. And there were a couple that were like 30, like in the late 90s, and like Pat Mahomes has been sacked. But literally for the first 75 years of NFL history, that sack was the longest sack of all time. It's still like third, which is incredible at your biggest moment, which is what makes it iconic, obviously. And so I have to ask also, so you're next year's champion no more, right? That's the title everybody wants to get rid of. So you get rid of that. There's a great picture of you in the locker room, video clip and picture of you smoking a cigar after that win. Tell me about that feeling of getting to the top of the mountain.
Well, I had a friend in Tyler we were partners in buying real estate on the interstate highways. They weren't building the interstate highways yet. They all had all the plans. They would show where the feeder roads came in and so forth. And he would buy, and he put a restaurant and a service station. He would lease Texaco back then. His name was Bud Cooper. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I just mainly hung around with him. I didn't have a lot of money to invest, but I did invest occasionally, a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he smoked Cuban cigars.
Oh, okay.
So he gave that to me for Super Bowl 5.
Right.
And I never took it out of the glass. But I put it in the freezer. And then I took it down we played that one in Miami, Super Bowl 5.
Yep.
We lost. I brought the thing back and I said, I'm gonna smoke this thing next year. And so I took it back with me to Super Bowl 6. It's still in the glass. I hadn't pulled it out. I did after the game. I pulled it out, and it was crinkly. It was very dry.
Okay.
So I went in. I ran some water over it, and kind of did like this, and made it stick together. And then it took me about 20 minutes to light it, and it barely stayed lit. But anyway, that picture that you're talking about. Whenever I sign that picture, I get a lot of those in the mail.
Okay, yeah.
My shoulder pads are white, cigars, and I got my teeth out. I put on there Super Bowl 6 cigar.
Right.
Small pen.
Love it.
I used this pen for doing that. I just did one today, matter of fact.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just one of those great shots, right? Yeah. It's just you can feel it. You can just feel the release.
And Bud he called me. He said, "How was that cigar?" And I said, "Well, I couldn't taste much of it because it was torn up." I said, "But I got it lit." He said, "Yeah, you look good."
It was symbolic.
All right.
So the Doomsday Defense, obviously, you win the Super Bowl, right? And now this team is just the 70s. You're obviously retiring after 74. You still got a few more years, a few more Pro Bowl years left. But it's interesting. I was looking at some of your old stats. Your defensive line, now obviously sacks were not a recorded statistic until after you retired, but I think it was in the 80s. But people have gone back and watched the film and like recorded them anyway. And it's amazing. I was looking at George Andre, Pugh, you, and Larry Cole.
Yep.
And the four of you combined have about 350 sacks in your career. You, Andre, and Pugh are like right up in the high 90s, and then Cole is like 60. And then the guys who came right behind you, like obviously nothing is perfect. So like Toomey starts to play. Ed Too Tall Jones is a rookie when you're in your last year. Harvey Martin, Randy White, like that group, they're at 390. So the two of you combined are like 750 or so sacks. I mean, it's just unbelievable run of defensive line play from your group. And I'm my own statistician, so I haven't been able to go through and track other teams. I'm hard pressed to think that there are many other teams that have done something like that in a span of 2 decades.
Yeah, like maybe the Rams possibly.
Okay, right.
I don't know how they did, but they had a good front four, and Minnesota had a good front four. They had the Purple People Eater and.
That's my team.
Yeah.
I'm a Vikings fan.
Yeah.
Minnesota.
Yeah. They were good.
There they are.
They had a good football team, good players, good guys.
Yeah. And also in 1970, and speaking of things that are iconic, your picture with your cigar, the sack of Greasy, they opened Texas Stadium. And so you guys move out of the Cotton Bowl into Texas Stadium. What was that like? Because that was just a completely different type of stadium at that time.
Well, we really didn't know. We did like the fact that we wouldn't be in the sun all day. You know, we had a hole in it. They always said that's Tom put that in so God could look down on his team.
Right.
But that wasn't the reason for ventilation. But anyway, when the sun came in, it did get hot where it was, but it wasn't like if it was on our part of the bench, we'd just move down to the park. But it wasn't bad.
Right.
And we did have ventilation. So that was good. The only thing bad about it was the turf. And the turf was, cleats would not work on that turf, regular cleats.
Okay.
So we all had to find what we liked. And the best thing that you could get was that rubber that, I can't remember what they call it now, but there was a kind of a clear looking rubber.
Yeah, I can picture it. I'm not going to know the name of it either.
I think the first company to do that was a German company, and I can't remember the name of that either.
Was it Adidas?
Adidas.
Yeah.
Well, there was another one.
Puma?
Another shoe company.
Puma?
Puma.
Puma, yeah.
I think it was Puma.
Yeah.
Adidas also. I mean, they both had them halfway through the season.
Sure.
And a lot of other teams were putting turf in as well.
Yeah.
So once we got that, they were fine. But you still, when you hit the ground, it didn't give because they put concrete. I don't think they used concrete, but they used asphalt underneath the field. Yeah. And so when they built Texas Stadium, they put granules in the cover that went over the pavement.
Okay.
And it was supposed to.
Like the carpet.
They let that harden.
Okay.
And then they had little granules, and they ran over it with a big roller weight, big round weight, retractor-like thing. It was supposed to cause those things to explode and create an air bubble. But it didn't do it. It broke them all down, and there was no pad.
Oh, man.
So it was about 3 or 4 years they changed it out, but it was hard to hit. I mean, you get knocked out quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
But I liked Texas Stadium. I did like it. I mean, it was a nice stadium at the time. It was a very nice stadium. AT&T Stadium is, it's just a very, very nice stadium.
Yeah.
And then, of course, LA's got a good one. I guess they got a good one in Vegas, and there's some very nice stadiums around.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot better technology for the turf too.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to ask you, I wanted to ask that Super Bowl team. It was interesting because this is obviously, again, well before free agency, but Tom brings into that team Forrest Gregg, Herb Adderley from Green Bay, Lance Allworth comes in from San Diego, Ditka, obviously a longtime Bear, had been in Philadelphia for a year or two. What was it like bringing those guys, like these kind of established veterans, into this team that's been together for the better part of a decade now? How did that? I mean, obviously it worked, right? You won, but what was that like, bringing those high-profile guys in?
Well, it was good. Ditka was a raw guy. He was, he was a very good player, but he fit right in. I mean, he was, and Forrest Gregg was also a very nice person. And he had gone to school at SMU, and he was home, and he was happy, and he was helping our offensive line. Taught him a lot of things that, like Jim Myers was a very good coach, but he never played in pro football in the offensive line.
Right.
So there's a lot of, just like playing tackle. I taught Jethro and Harvey and Ed a lot of things about flex defense and about techniques and about always look at their fingers when they put them on the ground. If they're red, that means they're up on the line of scrimmage. They're going to fire out, try to knock you down. So you want to be ready for that. And so my theory was, Coach Landry didn't like it, but I'd like to butt them right in the head, quick.
With your head?
Hit them hard. Yeah, with my head, right in the top of the head.
Right.
So that was head to head, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, like every 2 or 3 times a game, when they were really obvious that they were going to, I would go around them because I could get around them. And so I go around them, and I would be standing back there waiting on the back.
Right.
To run. And so Coach Landry called me in after about my 3rd or 4th time I did that. Well, he didn't call me in the first year. The second year, he called me in. He said, I noticed you're getting in a habit of going around blocks. He said, we don't allow that. He said, what are you doing that for? And I said, well, Coach, I'm going to show you. I said, see, when they get right up here and they're right in front of you and they're equally distanced from the tackle and the center, and they've got all this pressure on their fingernails, that means they're going to try to knock me down. And that they're zone block. And I said, so I like to pick a time in the game when I know they're going to do it, and go around them. He said, yeah, Bob, you're quick enough now, but he said, what happens when you get older and you're not as quick? And I said, I'll quit.
Exactly. Hang them up.
I'll quit doing it.
And you actually had an interesting technique. You were both hands down, right? You were like all 4 on the ground. Was that taught to you at some point, or was that just?
That was our flex defense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd done it in high school, so I was kind of used to it. But college, we just had 3 fingers on the ground.
So it was when you got to Dallas that you went back to 4 hands.
And I was supposed, like guard pulled, I was supposed to I wasn't supposed to grab him, but I was supposed to follow him.
Sure.
I mean, because anyway, and then the tackle would fill in my place, and then the Leroy would cover that side, the middle linebacker.
Yeah.
But what I did a lot, I mean, I could catch him. I caught most of the guards when they got pulled. I just couldn't grab them, or you'd get a penalty. I just grabbed the jersey. I'd run right with them, hold on to their jersey, just barely held on.
Right. On the inside. Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't really call it hold it,
Right.
And then I'd run along with this and look and see what's going on back there. Did
That's
that
great.
pretty often.
That's funny. Uh, I have to ask you, your last year, 74, not a playoff year, first time in like almost a decade that
That's
you don't
right.
go to the playoffs. And Dallas had obviously Detroit had been hosting Thanksgiving Day games since like the 30s or 40s. Dallas starts doing it in the mid 60s. Your last year,
Yeah.
74, and I remember this game vividly. You're not going to the playoffs. You're playing Washington, and they're beating you, and they knock Roger out, and in comes Clint Longley. And you guys, this is one of the you're probably down to your last 3 or 4 games of your career. You probably see him coming in thinking, all right, well, this probably isn't a great outcome. And then he puts in one of the greatest second half displays ever. Couple long bombs for touchdowns and wins the game. Tell me like what was going through your mind at that point, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on the Blaine Nye quote afterwards.
Okay. Well, anyway, when he came in and had that great second half, and we ended up beating Washington. That was I knew we weren't going to go into any playoffs or anything that year, but
Sure.
Our rivalry with Washington was so great that if we just beat them twice a year, I'd have been happy.
Right. It's like
So
Army Navy.
I was thrilled.
Yeah.
I mean, that made my year.
Yeah. And then Blaine Nye's quote afterwards of Clint Longley is this was the case of the triumph of the uncluttered mind.
That's the way he thought. Blaine went on to become a professor at Stanford.
Right. Yeah, he had a way with words.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you just a couple of things as we start to wind down. First of all, it goes without saying that some of the tributes. Dan Dierdorf calls you the greatest defensive tackle I've ever seen. Tom Landry said nobody is better than Lilly at the position. The Sporting News called you the best defensive tackle of all time. Obviously, the accolades are many. You're the first name to go up in the Ring of Honor. Okay, so quite an honor, and you have a back-to-back. In 1980, you go into the NFL Hall of Fame. In 1981, you go into the College Football Hall of Fame. So the accolades are just piling up. Tell me what that 2-year stretch was like, where you get put into both halls.
Well, I didn't know that whether I would get in the Hall of Fame or not. I really would have. That was really something that I hoped I would.
Sure.
You don't count on anything. And I'd sort of forgotten about the College Hall of Fame. It's called the National Football Hall of Fame, I think. College National Football Hall of Fame. And but I did go. I mean, my whole family and everybody, they took everybody up to the academy. We only had 4 guys that went in that year. It was Herb Adderley, Jim Otto, Deacon Jones, and myself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
we went out on a USO tour 71 after 71. After we lost in 70, I guess it was. We lost to Baltimore. But anyway, they took us to over near Vietnam, and we visited hospitals.
Okay.
And that was a group that went. There was 4 of us went on that too.
Okay.
But that was very exciting to be in the Hall of Fame. And then the College Hall of Fame, I went back up to New York and was introduced. It was, the Hall of Fame was a kind of a 3 or 4 days, 4 days, I think, was how long I was there. And we were busy all the time, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it. Got to meet a lot of my idols that I had when I was young, and got to see all the busts in the little town of Canton, which isn't a little town, but it's a beautiful small city.
Sure.
And anyway, that was just so delightful. The weather was good. It was just wonderful, and everybody in my family was there, and it's a lovely time. The College Hall of Fame was more inductees and big audience and very meaningful. But we didn't get involved much. I mean, it was like we'd go here for a banquet, we'd go here for a dinner.
Sure.
We were kind of spread out with other people, and whereas in the Hall of Fame we did the same, but we were together.
Okay.
We had to
Yeah.
sit together and eat together and talk together. So
Yeah.
they were both very, very amazing awards. I never dreamed when I was a little boy out there with my first little football helmet and football that I would. I didn't
Yeah.
even know there was a Hall of Fame,
Right.
but I never dreamed in college that I would ever get in the Hall of Fame. I just was doing the best I could,
Right.
and even in pro ball, you don't think about that. That was the least of my thoughts.
Right.
And then people started saying, "I think you're going to get in the Hall of Fame." And I said, "I wouldn't count on it because it's 5 years away, And sure enough, I got the call. I was
Yeah.
so excited.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I have to ask you, when you were playing, who were those offensive linemen? It could have been the guards lined up right across from you, but anybody, who were the offensive linemen that, you probably had the most respect for, the guys who really made you think going into a game, and who are the offensive linemen that you watch today and you think, man, that would have been a tough guy to go up against?
Yeah. Well, today they're just a lot bigger than they were back then. But I think the first one was Jim Parker. It's one of the first guards I played against. I played against him at tackle as well.
Sure.
At defensive end. I played
Yep.
there about a year and a half before I moved to tackle. Then I played him again at tackle, and he was about 6'8", 280 pounds, ran about a 9.600.
Jeez.
So he was quite a man, I'll tell you. And first time or two I played him, it was rough, but I got caught up pretty well. Tom
Yeah.
Mack was another. He was a fighter. He was a great guard.
Yeah. For the Rams.
Yeah, and he was good every time he played him. Exhibition season, real season, didn't matter. We generally played them every exhibition season. We scrimmaged them in Thousand Oaks. Then there was
There's a video clip of him, by the way, saying that you were the toughest defensive tackle he ever played against, just so you know.
another guy that was good was Kuchenberg, played at
Sure.
Miami. I thought he
Yep.
was a very good guard. And there were a lot of them. John Wooden, that played for Cleveland earlier.
Sure.
He was a good guard. There was at Green Bay. I played against Fuzzy Thurston.
Jerry Kramer.
Jerry played the other side, but there was another guy that came along. I don't know why.
Gail Gillingham.
Gail Gillingham was very good.
Yeah.
Gail was a very good guard. And I remember Larson was the center at New York. Larson was a very good center, very quick.
Okay.
And the center for Minnesota was very good.
Mick Tingelhoff.
Yeah, Tingelhoff.
Yeah.
But we played against them, their first game ever. You won't guess where it was. It was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Really? Oh, preseason game.
Preseason.
Oh, that's so funny. God, that's a great trivia question.
Yeah. And
Wow.
and Tarkington was there. I think I had been at the All-Star game.
Right.
Came back. I played the night before.
Right.
Coach Landry said, you need to get suited up. I said, well, I don't even know what the game plan is. He said, don't worry, you're only going to play on kicking teams and the short yardage.
So two quotes that I thought were great and just kind of spoke volumes. One from a legendary Cowboy a couple decades after you, Michael Irvin, said that Bob Lilly is the perfect first face of the franchise. He just looks like Texas. I always thought that just.
I never heard that, but
yeah,
I should. I grew up right out in the middle of it.
Exactly. I thought that was like the perfect. And then Tom Landry said, another Lilly won't come along during my lifetime. We are observing a man who will become a legend. And that's you, Bob Lilly. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come on Chasing Hardware. It's been a lot of fun walking through, the days in Texas, a year in Oregon, TCU years, and the Cowboy years. It's been a real pleasure to have you on Chasing Hardware.
Well, thank you, Rich. I've enjoyed the visit with you. And
Okay.
you carried me
Excellent.
back and reminded me of some good old days.
I'm sure they were, man. And like I said, that picture with the cigar, that kind of says it all. Well, thank you again, Bob Lilly, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You bet. You're welcome. Enjoyed it, Rich.
Okay.
Good luck.
And thank you for listening to Chasing Hardware. I've been your host, Rich LaMello. The Michael Stanley Band brought us in, and the Suburbs with Life is Like are going to take us out. Speak to you next time.
Tonight, it feels like life. Come on. Life is like. Life is like. Life is like what it